Deadpool was enjoying himself in an arcade, playing a shooting game with a small crowd gathered behind him. As he focused on the game, he noticed someone recording him. Without taking his eyes off the screen, he made sure to address his audience, insisting they capture only his good side. He even jokingly suggested that if the footage ended up on YouTube, they should emphasize that he was absolutely willing to sell out for sponsorships. In the middle of his game, a tap on the shoulder interrupted him. A mailman stood behind him, hesitantly trying to get his attention, but Deadpool cut him off. He had more important matters to deal with, such as entering his high score initials. Turning back to the mailman, Deadpool asked what the deal was, tossing out several famous mailman names in the process. The man, clearly used to none of this, simply handed over a letter, explaining that someone had said Deadpool could be found there. Deadpool eyed the envelope suspiciously. Was this jury duty? He had legal right to know if it was. Maybe it was time he engaged in more civic responsibilities, voting, recycling, helping Make-A-Wish kids ride Wolverine like a pony. With that thought, he tore the letter open. The mailman corrected him. His name was Tim, and for the record, he never said anything about jury duty. Deadpool ignored him, eyes scanning the letter. It was handwritten, clumsily but sincere.
Dear Deadpool, hello, how are you? Please, if you are free, would you come over to my house and kill my nightmares? I haven't been able to sleep well, and it's making me sad. Cannot pay you much money, but I will give you my allowance. Thank you. Peter Quincy, age 8.
Mailman then mentioned that since he had Deadpool there, he actually had a whole stack of other things he needed to deliver to him. But Deadpool, already thinking about making his quick getaway, wasn't about to stick around. Hopping into his mail truck, Deadpool thanked him for the ride, explaining that he had a little kid to put to sleep, but in a good way. Later, in Connecticut, Deadpool raced through the streets in the mail truck, letters and packages flying from the back as he yelled out, "Special delivery!" He wasn't exactly concerned about keeping the mail in the truck. It was more of a get there as fast as possible situation. He rang the doorbell and waited. A girl's voice came from inside before she even opened the door. When the door swung open, Deadpool stood there with a cardboard box over his head. He waited for a comment before prompting her. Come on, ask me what's in the box." The girl just looked at him, then at the dog in her hand, clearly confused. Deadpool pushed further, referencing classic 1997 thriller starring Gwyneth Paltrow. The girl simply stated that she had been born in 2002. Deadpool, shocked, questioned how someone her age could already be a parent. Before she could clarify, an excited voice interrupted from inside the house. From upstairs, an eager voice repeatedly asked if she had arrived. Within seconds, a young boy came barreling down the stairs in excitement, repeating the question over and over. Deadpool, momentarily thrown off, gave the girl credit for teaching him gender is fluid, but then he quickly realized Peter had just mistaken him for someone else. Peter, however, soon recognized him and was overjoyed. Without hesitation, he announced that Deadpool was coming straight to his room. Deadpool, curious, asked if the boy had been expecting someone else. Peter admitted that, while he had sent a letter to Deadpool, he'd also written several hundred others to Squirrel Girl about his nightmares. But Deadpool was the one who actually showed up. Peter's room was an overwhelming shrine to Squirrel Girl. Every inch of the space was covered in posters, action figures, and memorabilia dedicated to her. Deadpool took it in, commenting that squirrels were notoriously bad at replying to messages before asking for a reminder about what exactly he was supposed to do there. Peter quickly explained that he needed Deadpool to kill his nightmares. Deadpool, not entirely convinced, offered an alternative. Perhaps the kid just wanted to ride Wolverine around like a pony for a while, but Peter was insistent. His nightmares were severe, so bad that he had dreaded going to sleep, which made waking up for school miserable. It had even led him to develop an unhealthy sugar habit just to stay awake. Deadpool suggested that the usual bedtime remedies, warm milk, a bedtime story, perhaps something his oddly young-looking mother could help with. Peter immediately corrected him. The young woman wasn't his mother, but his babysitter, Kim, who watched him on weekends. The rest of the time, he was under the care of his neighbor Mr. Hewitt. His actual parents were frequently absent, off on what Peter guessed was either their third or fourth honeymoon in Bora Bora. Hearing this, Deadpool said, "You got nightmares? Huh. You got yourself a deal, kid. Eat your heart out, Squirrel Girl." Back in New York, Deadpool infiltrated Dr. Strange's Sanctum sanctorum. Slipping inside with little effort, Deadpool scanned the room for anything useful, dismissing objects as he went. Then, something caught his eye, the amulet of Agamotto. Making a joke to himself, he smashed the glass, grabbed the amulet, and slipped it over his neck. Unsure what to do next, he wondered if he was supposed to say a prayer or go to sleep. Before he could contemplate any further, a voice suddenly shouted for him to stop. It was Wong, the Sanctum's guardian, who immediately recognized Deadpool as an intruder. Wong reminded him that this was a sacred and protected space, and trespassers were dealt with accordingly. Without hesitation, Wong launched an attack. Deadpool had barely time to react. He was trying to explain in between dodges that he was simply attempting to commit some metaphorical abstract murder on behalf of a child. He wasn't entirely sure how the plan was supposed to work yet. But Wong wasn't interested in his excuses. With a swift kick, Wong sent Deadpool crashing into a glass case, shattering it on impact. In that brief moment before losing consciousness, Deadpool caught a glimpse of something. As he regained awareness, Deadpool groggily made a suggestion to Wong, asking, "Hey, buddy, ever feel like beheading a guy before?" Wong, confused, demanded to know what he was talking about. Deadpool, now piecing things together, says, "Turns out, while I'm wearing this sucker, all I need to do to get to the dream realm is do exactly what I do best. Die." Without hesitation, he leapt out of a nearby window, plummeting to the ground. His body hit the pavement with a sickening splatter, blood pouring around him. Moments later, Deadpool awoke in the dream realm. Sitting on the throne was the ruler of this place, Nightmare himself. He demanded to know who dared to enter his realm, where twisted fantasies drained of color reflected the fears of mortals back into their own hearts. He wanted to know which foolish soul thought themselves worthy of challenging him. Deadpool then made a sarcastic remark about Nightmare sounding bitter, as if he had majored in poetry. But Nightmare was already familiar with Deadpool and his so-called mask of irony. As a proper greeting, he attacked, sending Deadpool flying backward. As he tumbled through the air, Deadpool continued speaking, insisting that he was actually there on behalf of an 8-year-old boy named Peter Quincy from Connecticut. The kid was having nightmares, bad ones, since Nightmare was clearly the one responsible. Deadpool wanted to know what it would take to make him stop, but Nightmare made it clear they weren't in Peter's dream at the moment. Instead, they stood inside a nightmare belonging to Marie Antoinette. He explained that he had given her this vision of June 18, 1792, while she was imprisoned at the Conciergerie, awaiting trial. She was reliving the night her place was sieged, but Nightmare had made some modifications, wrapping it with terrifying monsters to amplify her suffering. As Deadpool watched, Nightmare continued, explaining that he fed on the fear of mortals, drawing sustenance from the sweat on their brows and tears hidden behind their closed eyes. Deadpool, preparing himself for a fight against the creatures, quipped that it all sounded oddly kinky, but before he could make another move, Nightmare snapped his fingers, shifting the scene entirely. Now, Deadpool stood in a different nightmare, one belonging to a lonely man who had sent thousands of young soldiers to their deaths. Nightmare revealed that he had brought this man back here, forcing him to see their graves every night for 7 months. He asked Deadpool if he finally understood the true depth of his power, the futility of his challenge. Deadpool, unfazed, pretended to dig through his pockets, joking that he might have a $5 bill somewhere, and wondered if the man would sign it for him. But Nightmare had no patience for his antics. He declared, "You fool, I am sustained by every nightmare in history, every tremor of fear, every shout in the night. This is my realm, and in my realm I am all-powerful. And what? You think, just because you made it into my realm with some sort of cheap trinket, that you're worthy of challenging me?" Deadpool, still unfazed, pointed out that the cheap trinket was probably solid 24-karat gold. Nightmare sat upon his throne, looking down at Deadpool. Deadpool reminding him that he was there on behalf of one kid, Peter Quincy. He didn't know what kind of twisted terror Nightmare had been planting in the boy's mind, but he figured it would be a real favor if he could just cut it out. Nightmare descended from his throne and said to him, "No, Although, I suppose as long as you're here in the nightmare realm, I might as well keep you around for an eternity or two. You made a foolish error in coming to meet the Leviathan of the underworld, the Lord and mighty God of this realm. He then summoned his creatures to attack Deadpool. Even as he fought them off, he couldn't help but critique Nightmare's phrasing, pointing out that Dream Demons was a missed opportunity when Dreamons was right there for the taking. His sarcastic commentary continued between dodging claws and fangs. Nightmare, growing frustrated, urged his minions to finish the job, but Deadpool managed to fend them off. Standing victorious, he turned to Nightmare, pushed his issue again. What was it going to take for them to go check on Peter Quincy's nightmares? The kid had written him a letter, and in the modern world, where nobody wrote letters anymore, that had to mean something. Nightmare, still unimpressed, shifted the focus. Instead of Peter Quincy's dream, he suggested something far more personal. Deadpool's own fears. What if he showed him his own nightmares? Deadpool didn't hesitate. He already knew his fears. First, clowns, creepy, with khaki makeup and unsettlingly large shoes. And worst of all, clown cows. Truly the stuff of horror. He suggested they skip the part where he had to fight off a herd of those abominations and get straight to the real issue at hand, Peter Quincy. Nightmare seemed almost disappointed in Deadpool's response. He questioned whether mortals truly found him amusing. Deadpool admitted he wasn't exactly haha funny, more like the kind of humor found in a New Yorker cartoon, meaning not very funny at all. Finally, Nightmare relented, but set his terms. He would show Deadpool the boy's nightmares, but just this one. Deadpool had to promise to leave the nightmare realm and never interfere again. Deadpool casually agreed. Nightmare then explained, "Nightmares are not just my fuel and my purpose, clown. I let the tiny humans live their fears in my realm. I torment them, and I feed on their fears. Yes, but I am giving a gift to mankind. Don't you see? When I give mankind nightmares, I also give them the gift of waking up from them. Do not be so quick to kill a nightmare, Wilson. You know not what true terror lies beneath." Deadpool, however, had already tuned him out. Distracted by his ride, he asked Nightmare if he could repeat the entire speech. Meanwhile, back in the waking world, Peter's babysitter, Kim, was preparing to leave the house. But Mr. Hewitt, the neighbor, would be over soon to check on him. As soon as she was gone, Mr. Hewitt appeared at the door to Peter's room. In the dream realm, Nightmare was on his monstrous steed, riding through the darkness while Deadpool clung to his tail, being dragged along. Nightmare admitted that millions of mortals were dreaming at any given time, and even he didn't know all of their nightmares by heart. He asked Deadpool for the boys' name again. Deadpool, still getting pummeled by debris as they flew, barely managed to get the words out. Peter Quincy, age 8. With that, Nightmare conjured a portal, opening a window into Peter's dream. Inside the nightmare, Peter sat at a dinner table, placed in the middle of a basketball court. Across from him sat a man who greeted Peter in a disturbingly familiar tone, reminding him not to tell anyone about their little games. Their secret. The man's form twisted and morphed into that of a grotesque gnome, grinning as he asked if Peter was going to be a good boy. As he walked towards Peter, he screamed and cried in terror. Deadpool watched in horror, turned his fury toward Nightmare. He swore that in 3 seconds he was going to rip Nightmare's emo teen hair off his head and feed it to his demonic horse. He demanded to know what was wrong with him. Nightmare explained that he only created nightmares within the dream realm. The terrors that haunted mortals came from the waking world. The horrors that tormented Peter weren't Nightmare's doing. Deadpool had come all this way to kill a nightmare that had never belonged to Nightmare at all. Deadpool turned back to Peter's nightmare, then looked down at the amulet of Agamotto around his neck. Without hesitation, he snapped it off. In an instant, Deadpool snapped back to the waking world. He was lying in a pool of his own blood, surrounded by a small crowd of bystanders, battered, broken, and bleeding. Deadpool forced himself to his feet. His body screamed in pain, but he ignored it. He had more important things to do. He had to get to Connecticut. Deadpool started walking, ready to finish what he started. In Peter's room, Mr. Hewitt moved closer, reaching out to touch the boy, when a sudden, loud voice interrupted from behind. Deadpool crashed through the window, making his dramatic entrance. Without hesitation, he launched into action, delivering a brutal kick. Deadpool made it clear that the man's time was up. Deadpool swiftly unsheathed his sword, slicing off the man's thumb in one clean motion. He tied him up, gagged him, and dragged him to the top of the stairs, positioning him like a soccer ball. With a dramatic flair, he wound up for a perfect kick and executed it flawlessly. Hewitt tumbled down violently, his face smashing against the steps, blood spilling as his teeth shattered on impact. The noise jolted Peter awake. Groggy and confused, the boy spotted Deadpool standing there. Deadpool crouched down, placing his hand gently on the kid's shoulders. He says, "Peter, what I'm going to say to you is very hard, and I know that. And I'm really sorry I have to be the one to say this to you now, but here it is. You owe me $7. Later, Deadpool made his exit, leaping out of the window and landing effortlessly on his feet. A portal suddenly opened before him, and from it emerged a furious Dr. Strange. He accused Deadpool of breaking into Sanctum sanctorum, disturbing his magical protections, and stealing a priceless artifact. Deadpool casually waved the amulet of Agamotto in front of him, commenting that the amulet wasn't exactly Dr. Strange's color. Strange simply extended his hand, demanding its return. Without argument, Deadpool handed over the bloodied artifact. Dr. Strange then asked whether Deadpool had actually managed to use it and master its secrets. Deadpool casually responded that he'd hung out with the Nightmare guy, ridden his horse and experienced a few dreams before returning. Strange, caught off guard, seemed skeptical, asking if he was joking, but Deadpool insisted that he wasn't joking this time. Strange began conjuring another portal, preparing to leave. Before he could step through, an old woman interrupted him. She asked if he was a magician and if he did children's birthday parties. She mentioned that their Elsa had cancelled last minute. She reassured Strange that the money was no object. Her husband worked on Wall Street after all. A silence followed. Then, without another word, Strange vanished through the portal, leaving Deadpool behind. Left alone with the old woman, he considered her offer. He agreed to do the party, but warned that it would be R-rated. He also admitted that, realistically, he wouldn't be able to get the bloodstains of his costume before then. He was about to suggest a fun excuse for the kids when, before he could finish his thought, the woman had already turned and disappeared into her house, shutting the door behind her without another word. He was left standing there mid-sentence, muttering something about ketchup to no one. Annoyed, Deadpool pulled out his phone. Behind him, the flashing lights of police cars and ambulances illuminated the scene as authorities arrived to handle the aftermath of the chaos he left behind. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel